What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we are just a little over 4 months away from the 2022 college football season. Around this time, I like to look at the schedule and try to figure out where College Game Day is going to go each week for the upcoming season. We've been doing this the last few years. It turns out to be somewhat, I haven't really looked at the numbers. We probably get about a half of these right, but a lot of things change when we get into the season. You know, some teams you think are going to be better than they actually turn out to be. And there's also the trick of trying to figure out, it's not always the best game of the week, but they like to throw in some curveballs. They like to go to games that are on ESPN or ABC much more than they want to go to a game that's on Fox. So that's another thing that you have to look at when you do this. But we're going to give it our best shot here and try to predict where game day will go. I think it's pretty obvious where the best games are going to be each week. At least you've got your top two and trying to figure it out from there. But again, this could change a lot because a lot of these teams that we think are going to be really good could wind up being not so good, and some teams are going to probably emerge that we didn't see coming, where they're going to be really good. So let's get started here with our first game, Week 0. I'm going to say they'll be in Montgomery, Alabama for Stephen F. Austin versus Jacksonville State. I don't think they're going to go to Ireland for Nebraska versus Northwestern. It's possible they do a studio show. That's what they used to do, but they went to a Week 0 game last year. It was a game in Atlanta, an FCS game in Atlanta, and there's another one of those this year. I don't really follow the FCS all that close, but when I looked at the two teams that are playing in Atlanta, they didn't have great records from last year. Stephen F. Austin, Jacksonville State, both two good FCS teams. So I'm going to predict that game day will go here if they go anywhere. This year they may just do a studio show. Who knows? I don't see them going to Ireland for Nebraska versus Northwestern. Just don't see that one coming. But I guess you never know. And that game, I'm assuming, is going to be on Fox because it's a Big Ten game. I don't know that for sure. And with travel restrictions and everything, who knows if that game will even be in Ireland. I don't know where we'll be at that point in time. But anyways, we're going to just say Stephen F. Austin, Jacksonville State, Montgomery, Alabama. That's where they go for Week 0. For Week 1, I've got game day going to Atlanta, Georgia for Oregon versus Georgia. Team that won it all last year, the Georgia Bulldogs. I know there's another big game, maybe the biggest non-conference game of the season with Notre Dame and Ohio State, but I'm not going to pick that game, and I'll tell you why. A couple of reasons why. First of all, when I do these predictions, I do not do the same location twice. So I do not have them going to the same place 2 times in the same season. I know they do that sometimes, but just for these predictions, that's just how I do it. I will never pick the same location twice. And so I've got Ohio State saved for another game. You probably already know which game that is. We'll get there in just a little bit. But that's the first reason. Second reason is because of the fact that that game is most likely going to be on Fox. Fox is going to get the first pick of the Big Ten games. More than likely, they will take that game. So that game most likely will be on Fox. I guess it'll be a big noon kickoff. And so I think, Oregon, Georgia, that's going to be the primetime ABC game or ESPN game, whatever. So I think that's where they're going to go. It's the team that won it all, the defending national champions. I really think that game day will go to this game. Now, I agree. If you say that Notre Dame versus Ohio State's a bigger game, I would agree with that. I think those two teams will be ranked a little bit higher. But I think game day going to go to this game in Atlanta, Georgia. Oregon versus Georgia in a huge non-conference game. Not quite as big as Notre Dame and Ohio State, but for the reasons I just mentioned, I think game day goes here. And Georgia winning it all last year, I think that'll play into this as well. They're going to want to go see the defending national champs. So let's go to Week 2 now. I've got Alabama at Texas. I'm going to Austin, Texas for this game. You've also got Baylor at BYU. That was the only game that really, I thought maybe they want to go to BYU. Both teams will be ranked, but I don't think they pass up a big non-conference game like this. You got the powerhouse Alabama, the upcoming program, or at least we think they're coming up, Texas. Texas, a team that was ranked in the top 10 of the preseason FPI rankings. I think there'll be a lot of hype. Plus, you've got Sark taking on his former boss, Nick Saban. So there are a lot of storylines and just two big-time programs. I feel pretty confident that the game day is going to go here. Game could wind up on Fox, I guess, because it's a Big 12 team. But I think regardless of where this game winds up on TV, I think Game Day will go to Austin, Texas in week 2. Week 3, I think they're back in the state of Texas. It's Miami at Texas A&M. This is a pretty tough week when I look here at week 3. You've got some other options for sure, and this one again, I was really kind of going back and forth on some of these games. Other games for week 3, you've got BYU at Oregon. Oregon, if they lose to Georgia and it's a blowout, I don't know where they'll be ranked. Maybe they're not ranked at all. They could still be ranked, or who knows. If they win that game, then I think Game Day maybe goes to Oregon. And then BYU is expected to be a top 20 team more than likely. So these are 2 quality teams, just not quite as good as Miami and Texas A&M. You've got Penn State at Auburn. I think Game Day went to Penn State for that game last year. That'll be one that they would consider if the game winds up on ABC. Again, you got Oklahoma at Nebraska. That game, and I say ABC, I don't think they can put an SEC team at home. I don't think they can put that on ABC. I think that would have to be on ESPN. So ESPN, ABC, whatever. Oklahoma and Nebraska, another game where I think they could possibly go. It should be a good game. Both teams, I don't know if Nebraska will be ranked if they win their first couple of games. I don't know if they'll be ranked yet. Oklahoma probably will be ranked. So that, old rivalry, that's one you would consider. But I think Miami and Texas A&M, that's a big non-conference game. I think Miami is going to be pretty good this year. Mario Cristobal taking over, that's going to give them some hype around their program. And Texas A&M, with that recruiting class they just had, they're going to be a top 10 team. So I think this is the pick here. Miami at Texas A&M for week 3. Moving on to week 4, we've got Clemson at Wake Forest. Yes, I think Game Day is going to go to Wake Forest. Other games this week, you've got Florida at Tennessee. Both of those teams are going to be probably on the edge of possibly being ranked, depending on how the first couple of weeks go. Wisconsin at Ohio State, that could be a big game, but like I said earlier, I've got Ohio State for another game. You got Arkansas versus Texas A&M. That could be a big one. That game, though, probably going to be on CBS, and they just would have went to Texas A&M the week before. I think they go to this game. I think they want to go see Wake Forest, a team that really emerged last year in the ACC. They have pretty decent expectations this year. I think they will be a preseason top 25 team, maybe even a top 15 team. Clemson, I think, is going to be a top 5, top 10 for sure team in the preseason. So I think they go to this game, a big game in the ACC. I think that it'll probably be the primetime ABC game. So I think that's where they're going to go in week 4. Week 5, I got them going to Baylor, Oklahoma State at Baylor. A rematch from last year's Big 12 championship game. Both teams expected to be ranked in the preseason, and I believe they will still be ranked at this point. We got some other good games this week. NC State at Clemson. I think there's another opportunity to go to Clemson, though. I was really considering that game because NC State's another team that I think could be ranked in the top 15. So that's definitely a possibility. They might look down the road and decide not to go to Clemson later on in another game where I'm going to go ahead and spoil it here. I've got them going to Clemson. So that's the one that if it's not Oklahoma State at Baylor, I think they would go to Clemson, and it's a very real possibility that they will go to Clemson. Another thing is they just went to the Clemson at Wake Forest game the week before, so maybe that plays into this. You've got Alabama at Arkansas. That's going to be a huge game in the SEC. If Arkansas is undefeated, if they beat Texas A&M, I think they might go to that one. Alabama at Arkansas. So that will really just depend on Arkansas' start to the season. You got LSU at Auburn in a big game in the SEC every year, but I don't think those teams are going to be ranked high enough. So I do have them going to Oklahoma State at Baylor. A big game in the Big 12, possibly the two highest ranked teams in the Big 12 at this point. So I'm going to put them there in Week 5. Week 6, we've got Texas A&M and Alabama. Huge game in the SEC. If A&M is undefeated, I think it's no doubt they're going to this game. Now, if A&M loses to Arkansas or they're coming out sluggish and maybe they've lost 2 games or whatever, then they probably won't go to this game. But if Texas A&M is sitting there undefeated, they will 100% go to this game. I don't really see – I know it will be a CBS game, but still I feel confident that they're going to go to this game. Texas and Oklahoma. Now, if both of those teams are undefeated, or let's say if Texas has only lost to Alabama and Oklahoma's undefeated, that's a possibility. Probably not, though, and that's probably a good chance that game could be the big noon kickoff game as well. Auburn at Georgia. If Auburn's playing well and they're ranked, perhaps they go to Athens for that one. Notre Dame versus BYU. I think they play in Las Vegas. That could be an interesting game there to possibly go to. And then you got Ohio State at Michigan State. If both teams are undefeated, I think that's a possibility. But to me, it's this game in the SEC. The big name programs here, A&M versus Alabama, especially if A&M is still undefeated. If they've lost a game, perhaps they go to one of those others. But this is my pick. Week 7, USC at Utah. I don't think there's going to be a ton of opportunities to go to the Pac-12, but I think they're going to jump on this one. Utah will be the preseason favorite in the Pac-12 South, in my opinion. USC with Lincoln Riley, going to be a lot of hype around their team. And so this is the game I think Game Day definitely is going to want to go to. Probably the ABC primetime game that week as well. We've got Arkansas at BYU, just an interesting game there. Let's say Arkansas is undefeated. BYU, let's say they're undefeated. Then you could possibly see them going to that game. Alabama at Tennessee, if Tennessee gets off to a good start, maybe. LSU at Florida, if those two teams are better than we expect and they're undefeated or are sitting there ranked, maybe they go there. Penn State at Michigan, another big game. Perhaps they could go to that one. I do have them going to another Michigan game, though. And then Wisconsin and Michigan State, another pretty big game. So you can see every week there are options, and it's really going to be about how the season plays out. You can look at the games now and say, well, that's going to be the biggest game. But like I just mentioned, what if USC's lost a couple of games? Utah's lost a game, but Arkansas and BYU are undefeated, and they're both ranked in the top 10. I mean, that's where Game Day is going to go. So it's tough to predict, but I'm going to give it my best shot here again. That's where I've got them going in Week 7. Moving on to Week 8, I've got Texas at Oklahoma State. This is a week that's kind of slow. I mean, we got Ole Miss at LSU. If those two teams are ranked high, I could definitely see them going to that one. UCLA and Oregon. Could UCLA possibly be ranked? Where will Oregon be? Iowa at Ohio State. Purdue at Wisconsin. Could be a big game in the Big Ten West. I mean, there are plenty of options. No great options as far as games that really just stand out as being huge games. So I'm going to say they go back to the Big 12. Texas at Oklahoma State. If Texas gets off to a good start, they could be ranked. And Oklahoma State more than likely will be ranked. So that's where I've got them in Week 8. Week 9, Michigan State at Michigan. I think this will be a huge game this year. A lot of people think Michigan State's going to drop off. I think this team's going to be good once again this year. And Michigan, team that just went to the playoff, they've got a pretty easy schedule. I'd be surprised if they're sitting here with more than one loss. They might even be undefeated. So this is a huge game. It probably will be the big noon game. But you've also got Ohio State at Penn State this week. So I don't know who's going to get, which game's going to ABC, which game's going to be Fox. That could play into this. If Ohio State at Penn State is on ABC primetime, they could possibly go there instead. But I do think they'll want to go to Michigan. So I think I'm going to say Michigan State at Michigan. That's my pick. You've also got Ole Miss at Texas A&M. Cincinnati at UCF. If they want to do a group of 5 game, that might be the best one. And then also you got Florida versus Georgia, which is always a big game. But my pick, again, Michigan State at Michigan. Huge game. Could be a top 10 matchup. And that's where I'm picking for Week 9. Week 10, I've got Notre Dame hosting Game Day. Clemson at Notre Dame, of course. Notre Dame home games are going to be on NBC, but this game's just too big to pass up. Very good chance both teams are in the top 10, and it's just the best game of the week. You've also got Wake Forest at NC State if they really just want to do an ABC game. Let's say Wake Forest and NC State both beat Clemson. They're undefeated. They could definitely go there. I don't know that that's going to happen. Tennessee at Georgia could be a big game. Alabama at LSU, always a big one. Baylor at Oklahoma, that could be a big game. But to me, especially looking at it right now, Clemson Notre Dame is the biggest game, and that's my pick. Week 11, I've got them going to Ole Miss, Alabama and Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to be good this year. Some people think that they're going to drop off. I think the Rebels will be a top 25, maybe a top 15 team again this season. That's probably the biggest game. It's kind of a slow week. We got LSU at Arkansas in there. Not really much going on outside of the SEC in terms of big games. So I'm going to say Alabama versus Ole Miss here for Week 11. Week 12, here's my game for Clemson. Miami versus Clemson. I'm high on this Clemson team. I believe they will be ranked, maybe a top 15 team. Clemson, I think, is going to be a top 10 team. Huge game in the ACC, perhaps the first of 2 meetings between these two teams. We got Wisconsin and Nebraska. Could be a big game in the Big Ten West. Ole Miss at Arkansas. Georgia at Kentucky. Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. If they're ranked really high, could see them possibly going there. Utah at Oregon. Where are those two teams? Possibly they go to that one. That could be a big one in the Pac-12. But I'm going to say Miami at Clemson, probably the ABC primetime game. I think it's going to be the best game of the weekend. and it's my pick for Week 12. Week 13, final week of the regular season, it's Michigan, Ohio State. I don't think there's really any doubt about this one. Unless we see some teams emerge or one of these teams drop off this year, I'd say this is probably the easiest pick of the season. I mean, Notre Dame at USC, that's an option. Pittsburgh at Miami in a game that could determine the Coastal Division. Those are two pretty big games, but I don't think they come close to Michigan and Ohio State. It's probably going to be a big noon game again this year. It'll be on Fox, but still, I think game day will be at this game. It's going to be huge, possibly a game for the Big Ten East Championship. So that is definitely my pick. I definitely think that's where they're going to finish things off in the regular season. I didn't go beyond the regular season this time. They'll probably go to the SEC Championship in the conference tournament or conference championship weekend. I'm pretty sure that's where they'll go. They usually wind up there anyways. Good chance it's Alabama versus Georgia. Huge game. So I'd say they'll go there, and then of course Army Navy after that. So those are my picks for College Game Day, where I'm predicting that they will go each week of the 2022 college football season. Love to get your thoughts, your predictions. Which ones do you like? Which ones would you change? Where would you go, or where do you expect them to go differently from where I predicted? Maybe you've got some off-the-radar games where they could possibly go. There's always some of those, and I always overlook those. Like, is there a game where two teams are playing for the 100th time, or is there something going on in a certain city? You know, who knows what's going to happen. They'll have some weird choices, or at least one of those probably. But I'm just looking at this from the standpoint of the best football games, and also just trying to look at the networks that will air the games to possibly play into it as well. And these are my picks. So give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports YouTube channel.